A warning before you listen.
What you are about to hear is not meant for children, nor for the faint of heart. This is an unfiltered retelling of ancient myths, told as they were born, raw, violent, unsoftened. Expect scenes of brutality, curses that linger, betrayals that reshape fate, and a hunger for power that shows no mercy. These myths were never meant to lull children to sleep. They were forged in blood, shadow, and fire. So ask yourself, are you ready to hear them as they were first told? Sources and references can be found in the episode description.
In this audio epic, we tell the story Chaos, Gaia, and Uranus, from void to tyranny, prologue. Before the beginning, when desire trembled in the void. No one tells this story, because those who lived it burned, and those who heard it were never the same again. This isn't a tale of a world being shaped, nor of a god creating light from darkness. This is the tale of the crack itself, the fracture in silence when the abyss gasped, but had no mouth to scream. We do not begin here with the first step, but with the first shiver in the ribs of silence, the first whisper of a will slicing through the skin of nothingness, not to create, but to declare, I refuse to dissolve. Imagine a cosmos without breath, without heart, without walls for a sigh to lean on. Now imagine a woman born inside it, a woman whose body did not yet know how to curve, but whose soul pulsed with the urge to be touched, to be seen, to be pierced or held or punished. This is not the story of how the world began. This is a confession of the moment when a female hand rose not to caress, but to forge a weapon. Here creation is not born from love, but from pressure, from suffocation, from the silent violence of a first unspoken violation, murmured only in the margins of forgotten myth. The sky was never high, it had fallen, heavy on the earth, like the body of a man who desires but does not understand, who presses but does not love, who enters but does not hear the scream. And the earth was never given life. She took it, wrenched it from the jaws of stillness. She was not made to bloom, but to bury. She buried her children, her desires, her tears, even her own name. But she took revenge. This is not the voice of the universe. It is the groan of a womb-turned furnace, a place that once bore life, now melting rage into a blade. This is no origin story. It is an indictment, a confession that the first to act was not a creator, but a violator, and the first to carry life was not blessed, but wounded, forced into motherhood not by choice, but by domination. Here, you will not hear about beginnings, but about open wounds in the night of the gods, about a sky that bled, about an earth that gasped, and no one heard her. You'll step into the heart of the first cry, which was never prayer, but hunger, and never a hunger for union, but for severance. This is not the story of creation, but of the crime that came before it, the desire that spilled and became tyranny, the femininity that suffered and became the very engine of power. Enter, but do not ask for mercy. Here desire is not whispered, it is torn, and the sky does not rise, it is cleaved. This is the tale of a woman who was not born to be loved, but to be violated, and of a ceiling not made to shelter, but to suffocate, a womb turned tomb, a sickle forged from gasps that no one heard, a sky not cut by sword, but torn from its side. This is not a creation myth, but the first betrayal, when the male descended from the heights, and the female rose, bleeding, from the first fall to the first revenge, from the void to tyranny. This is no legend. This is a confession of the curse that began it all.
Chapter 1. From the chaos epic Gaia and Uranus, from chaos to tyranny. When the void gasped,
Before even darkness was born, before bodies learned to ache for light, there was a presence, not a thing, not a being, but something that defied even the idea of being known. Not silence, but the denial of silence, not emptiness, but a force that peeled meaning from the word existence and crushed it beneath the weight of a question that had no answer. That was chaos, older than light, older than pain, older even than longing. Chaos was not death, for death needs life to oppose. It wasn't a grave, but a curse still searching for a victim. It slithered, colorless, scentless, like a venomous fog coiling around the neck of meaning, its claws buried deep in the roots of time before time began. Imagine breath that tries to be born, but chokes itself, afraid to feel. Imagine a gasp with no lungs, a body curling inward, desperate not to be seen. In that nothingness, there was no where, no when, no how, only no. A cosmic no, unyielding, devouring, resisting even the idea of understanding.
Chaos was no beast. It was the lust before the beast learns hunger. It was the craving not to exist, the seduction that made stillness act without a sound. Everything that came after was running, every world born, a frantic attempt to erase the memory of chaos. But chaos is not an event, it is a sensation, one that gnaws at your bones when you're alone, staring into the ceiling at night, realizing you don't know why you exist. Sometimes you hear its echo in your chest, when you wake up in the cold, unsure of who you are. When you look into a mirror and fear the reflection isn't yours. That is chaos, the emptiness that lives in you even when you feel full, the whisper that reminds you everything you believe is collapsible. Picture it now, a body without form, its limbs reaching in every direction, and yet going nowhere, feeling itself the way a predator's hand traces the skin of its prey in her sleep, but without pleasure, without guilt, just a need to spoil everything before anything begins. The cosmos, it wasn't trying to be born, it was trying to resist chaos, and that resistance was the first tremor, not a birth, but a counter-violation, as if the void had finally buckled under its own weight. In that moment, light was not born, darkness choked on itself, chaos did not die. It seeped into every corner of longing, into every tear shed unseen. It sank into the wombs of gods yet to be born, into the bodies of men who thought they owned the earth. Chaos was never created, it has always been, watching, breathing through your worst moments, and whispering that no matter how much you love, how brightly you shine, how fiercely you create, you are still a being born from nothing and destined to end in no one. And from the womb of chaos, 5 embers of non-being slipped into form. Gaia, the first earth, the body that said no. Tartarus, the deep pit where thrones will one day rot. Erebus, the primordial shadow before night even existed. Nyx, night itself, not as time, but as a bleeding presence birthing curses. And Eros, not gentle love, but raw desire, the force that drives things to collide or to collapse. They were not born in flesh, they were waves, ripples in the skin of nothingness. But Gaia alone rose from the silence with a living body and said, "Enough. This is not the beginning of the story. It is the reason stories must be told, to cover up the unbearable truth that there is no story at all. And so we begin, not with meaning, but with the place meaning cannot reach, from a rupture in cosmic memory, from a tremor that did not want to become life, but only to scream. And so it began, a scream without a mouth, in a void with no echo, in a cosmos that never wanted to be, only to not be chaos. Chapter 2. From the Chaos Epic, Gaia and Uranus, from chaos to tyranny. The birth of Gaia, the body that said no. Birth was not a tale of light. It wasn't a blooming nor a moment of grace. It was rupture, a violent tremor in the side of silence, a scream with no throat, tearing through the heart of nothingness like a womb torn by a rebellious fist. Gaia wasn't born like mothers are born. She was torn out. A sticky rebellion, a desire scratching at the skin of meaninglessness, quivering like forbidden lust in a body never allowed to love. She did not come as a woman, but as a woman the cosmos had tried to forget, and failed. She wasn't summoned by the will of the universe, but forced herself into being because she refused not to be. She was the first presence of a body that wanted to feel, not moaning from pain, but from the terrifying clarity of existing. Gaia didn't bloom like a flower. She split open like a wound in the ribs of the cosmos, from which spilled the first thing that dared say, "I am." She trembled. There was no heart, but there was shuddering. No sweat, but warmth rising like breath. She was enacting the first tremor of a feminine longing, untouched, but choosing to awaken anyway. No one was watching from above. She didn't care. She stretched, with no map, no boundary. Every pulse in her forming body was an act of war against the void. Every breast, every curve, every fold along her hip was physical defiance, as if her womanhood declared, "I will not be passage, I will be terrain." She was not yet a mother, but she longed to be filled, not with desire, but with something that could finally show her the difference between inside and outside, between touch and devouring, between being seeded and being invaded. She wanted to be seen, not with eyes, but with ache, to be approached, not as a god, but as a craving without a home. She rose from beneath absence like flame drawn out of dampness, and she was soaked, not with water, but with pain, dripping from every cell in her becoming. Gaia, as if practicing the first act of existential self-pleasure. She touched her own edges, searched for herself like a virgin groping for joy in the dark. She gasped without voice, contracted without hand, and waited, not knowing what she waited for. She was forming slowly, in silent moans, in a choke that pulled her from the ends of chaos, etching the first map of a woman who refused to be touched unless she chose. Each heartbeat drew borders. She now had hips, contours. She began to understand what it meant to have an above and below, to have a chest not meant to cradle but to challenge, and a voice deep inside whispered, "I will not go back to nothingness, even if the sky crushes me." She stiffened, not in death, but in divine defiance. A goddess incarnating into a body that refused to obey, refused to submit, refused to be told, "This is how you were made." Gaia wasn't shaped to be a vessel, but to be the first mixture of ache and lust, of yearning and blood, of femininity left unsatisfied, and thirst unsure of what it craves. The first thing she ever wanted wasn't a child, nor a star, nor a prayer, but a ceiling. Gaia, the one who rose from the depths, looked upward and said, "I don't want to simply stretch outward. I want to be touched, held, confronted." But she didn't know that the first to come would not embrace her, but strangle her. Gaia was the first earth, but she wasn't soil. She was living flesh, heated spirit, a womb trembling alone in the void.
waiting for the first invasion, not to be complete, but to be tested. And in that moment, when a woman reaches the height of her hunger and no one feeds her, the earth becomes ready, not for life, but for myth. Gaia never waited for love. She needed to be touched, as if calling out to the coming sky, "Come, but don't forget, I was born without you. I trembled alone, in a night with no stars, in a void with no gasp. I am not a field to be sown. I am a body that resists being just a harvest." And that was how the myth began. A female body stretching through nothingness, shaking, not because it had been fulfilled, but because it finally dared to want.
Chapter 3. From the Chaos Epic. Gaia and Uranus. From Chaos to Tyranny. The ceiling that crushed the goddess. As her body thickened, as her tremors no longer faded into themselves, Gaia birthed three forces by herself. The mountains rising from her hips like ribs gasping for air. Aurea, the inner sea, spilling from between her thighs like a scream unscreamed. And Uranus, the sky. She didn't create him out of desire. She created him because she needed a ceiling, a boundary, a breath from above that might match the quaking within. But when she looked at him, it wasn't enough. Yes, she had given birth, but she had not yet been touched. In the beginning, she stretched alone, felt her own form, reshaped it again and again like a memory that refuses to forget the first violation. She knew she was incomplete, not broken, but missing something. Something she couldn't name, couldn't picture, but deeply craved. She looked upward and wished something would fall, not to seed her, but to define her, to whisper, "Here, you end." She wanted edges. She wanted to feel fullness, not from within, but from above. And then it came, not as light, not as grace, not as longing, but as pressure. A blue force dropped upon her, like a wall clenched in hatred. A sky that longed for her, but didn't know how to touch. That was Uranus. He did not descend like a lover, but like a conqueror, a ceiling dangling from a ruthless urge, crashing down on her body like a wall of velvet cruelty, soft to the skin, but cleaving to the soul. He was beautiful, not in feature, but in dominance. Vast, not in size, but in his ability to cover everything. He touched her the first time without asking, like a woman who mistook waiting for a promise of embrace, but was met with invasion. Uranus was no romantic. He was a flood of dominance poured onto a fragile, yearning form. And for a moment, Gaia believed this might be fulfillment. Instead, it was a curse poured into her. When he entered her, there was no pleasure. It was sealing a crack, a forced fit, as if spilling himself into her was merely a way to ensure she'd never feel alone again. Gaia didn't scream, she trembled, not in ecstasy, but in a voiceless gasp, because something had happened to her, but not with her. The sky did not fertilize the earth. It settled upon her like a soft nightmare, a weight that would never lift, a presence she never wanted, but could never push away. There was no love, only sacred occupation. No kiss, just a twisting in the ribs of the earth. And Uranus? He did not enter to seek delight. He entered to affirm, "You are beneath me. I will remain above you, and all your cries will die inside you." Over and over he descended on her, like moonless night, like clouds pressing her body until it swelled from within. She opened, split, sealed again, and remained silent. Each time the earth grew wider, heavier, not with the weight of motherhood, but of imprisonment. She did not lie beneath a sky, but beneath a ceiling that would not whisper, would not speak, would not love. It only loomed, imposing its presence like law, and with every thrust of his body into hers, something was lost. A dream, a warmth, a piece of feminine dignity she once thought would be quenched by the sky's touch. But Uranus was no sky. He was a shackle, a ceiling without sun, a shadow without meaning. A man not made to understand Earth, but to imprison her. Each night, Gaia knew he would come, not to hold her, but to repeat the act, the same, with the same indifference, the same weight, the same invasion that left only stillness in its wake. To be used, not desired, to be inhabited, not lived with, to be violated, but with a quiet that kills the scream at its root. Beneath Uranus, the earth trembled, and every cell in her whispered, "I am not yours. Not for your body that doesn't listen. Not for your manhood with no fingers." Gaia, she who had risen from the scream, now found herself a surface to be mounted, a ground for weight, a body stretched beneath a man who would not leave and could not love. And so, their first union was not a joining, but a lesson in dominance. The first night, long and merciless, did not begin with a kiss, nor end in shuddering joy. It ended with a ceiling crushing down on a woman until she forgot that what she longed for was to be touched, not flattened. Chapter 4. From the Chaos Epic. Gaia and Uranus. From Chaos to Tyranny. The Iron Birth. Screams from the imprisoned womb. The womb was not a prison at first, it was anticipation. A warm hum beneath the skin, a primal glow fermenting in the depths of the goddess, like the first stirrings of desire before anyone dares to touch it. It shimmered, untouched but alive. But when Uranus descended, turning embrace into pressure and union into occupation, the womb was no longer a cradle. It became a tomb, still breathing. Gaia twisted over her own body. Each gasp delivered a man. Each shiver carved a monster. She didn't give birth out of love, but through the brutal friction between humiliation and rage. They didn't come out on wings of light, but like torn shards of a shattered dream, like fingernails grown from flesh, not to beautify, but to scratch. The Titans came first, the heaviest. Male and female, but none of them bore a smiling face. Their bones were long, shoulders wide like they were built to carry the sins of ages, and their faces, as if they were born already knowing no one would ever hold them. They entered the world like pillars of pain, stones stacked around their mother, as if to build a wall to protect her from the sky. But they never truly left her, because the sky buried them. Uranus did not bury them in the soil, but inside her. One by one, they were sent back to the womb, like prisoners returning to the cell that first caged them. No trial, no memory of light, just dense silence, eternal dampness, and the body of a mother holding them, not out of will, but because she had no power to say no. Then came the ones with the single eye, the Cyclopes, 3 of them. Born in a moment no one wanted to witness. They had no eyelids. Their eyes stared constantly, like open wombs exposed to air. They saw everything in an instant. The shame, the invasion, the tyranny. They saw it all and never blinked. And then the womb exploded again, this time with the Hecatoncheirus, the 100-handed giants, beings too immense for language, each one like a walking mountain. Except no mountain walks. Their arms pulsed like the veins of the world. Their voices, when they moved, cracked stone, but no one heard them. Because they were buried, before they could speak. Every birth was a choke, every choke jammed again into her throat.
No one was allowed to exit.
No one was allowed to breathe. The womb became a pit, and the pit was sealed, and Uranus sat upon it. Each time he descended, he blocked the passage with his body. He closed the gate and left as if nothing had happened. Gaia no longer cried. She stretched like land learning how to become a grave, like a womanhood learning to be silent so it wouldn't be torn even more. They were many. They were massive, but none could scream, because in those depths, screams don't rise. They ricochet. They turn into muscle, then into knots, then into fists, waiting. And so Gaia transformed, from a mother who gives birth, into a land that stores monsters. And the monsters? They weren't demons. They were children. Children denied the right to be born. Children whose shoulders grew from rejection, whose eyes were shaped by darkness, whose voices were forged from the silence pressed into the chests of every mother. Entire generations, born from between the thighs of a goddess who dreamed of the sky, but was met with tyranny. She birthed titans, and beasts, and sleepless eyes, and arms no world could contain. But they all remained inside, clawing at her flesh with the fingernails of patience, and every cell within them held one promise: we will not remain in this womb forever. The day will come, we will emerge, but not as suns, as explosions, and we will tear apart everything above. If you've made it this far, then you are truly a seeker of knowledge. Support this journey with a kind word, a simple like, or even a small subscription, for its impact is far greater than you think. Your voice is the one that keeps this saga alive. Chapter 5. From the Chaos Epic, Gaia and Uranus. From chaos to tyranny. The prison. When the goddess became a trap, Gaia was not free, nor was she enslaved. She was something else entirely, something unnamed, known only to those who've been pinned down, stretched open without ever being asked. She wasn't just in pain. She was being stored, used like land no one asks permission to sow, only to dump into it all that could not be endured. Each time Uranus descended, his body fell like a lock, like a barricade, a slab of celestial concrete sealing the exit before allowing an entrance. He didn't make love. He imposed authority. He poured himself into her like water into a sealed well, then rose again, never knowing, never caring, whether what lay inside was groaning, bleeding, begging, or hardening into stone. And Gaia, every time she tried to open her mouth, his weight closed it. Every time her womb stirred, with a child, a stone, a monster, the sky returned and buried it again. Her body had become a field forced into silence, though it pulsed with screams. Her womb boiled with voices that had never learned speech, with beings born and caged in the same moment, with heartbeats knocking against the walls of her belly, like souls knocking at coffin lids, buried alive. But the sky never listened. Every night Uranus came down like a nail hammered into wood, staking his claim, then leaving as if the earth were not a woman. Femininity, once a sacred power in her gaze, had become a curse, a map of flesh meant only to open, to widen, to swallow, and remain silent. And as time passed, Gaia began to harden. Every point in her body stiffened, every softness froze, every trace of womanhood clenched into a fist. She no longer knew whether she was a mother or a tomb. Was she a beginning of creation or a vault for everything the world feared? Her children, planted inside her without tenderness, did not cry for milk or warmth. They only wanted to be born. But they stayed inside, growing like roots of iron, tangled in her depths, twisting like veins in tortured flesh. Sometimes she thought one of them screamed, that a hand reached out, That one creature pressed its brow toward the surface, but then the sky would fall again and smother it all. Gaia had become more than a body. She had become a cell. The prison wasn't made of iron. It was her own flesh. Her place became a grave. Her voice just an echo lost between the thighs of the sky. Every rib became a bar. Every muscle a restraint. Every breath an accusation. And night was the hour of humiliation. The time when the goddess should have been held was the time she was invaded. Each dusk, Uranus descended like a final wave, pressed his weight into her, and left behind something new. She never knew if it was a child, a curse, or a punishment. The sky above her was not a sky, it was a jailer. A ceiling that would not open, a shadow that never cooled. A man who didn't love, only pinned like shame, nailed to an unerasable wall. And Gaia? She stopped crying. She started planning. When a soul is violated enough times, it stops craving mercy, it starts craving revenge. She began to think, to wonder how a womb, once a sanctuary of life, could become a factory of bombs, how motherhood could become a weapon, how a woman's fingernails could shape a blade. She started to imagine the shape of the knife, the sound of the cut, the day when the sky wouldn't descend, but fall. That is tension, no scream, no blood, just a woman planning. A woman who no longer wants freedom, but vengeance. Chapter 6. From the Chaos Epic. Gaia and Uranus, from chaos to tyranny. The sickle. When the goddess severed the sky. There comes a point when patience is no longer a virtue, a line where a mother sheds the illusion of mercy, abandons the dream of protection, and begins to dig. Not into the earth, but into herself. Gaia had reached that line. Nights of celestial violation, bodies born and buried within her without light, contractions not from pleasure, but from fury, from pressure, from the burning need to scream. The sky thought it had locked down a body, but it never understood. The quietest bodies are the ones that cook vengeance the slowest. Gaia no longer prayed. She no longer begged. She began to sharpen her thoughts. Her femininity turned to metal. She stopped waiting. She started forging. With her nails, her saliva, the skin that peeled from her in nightly resistance, she gathered the scraps of humiliation and melted them in her heart. Every tremor in her womb was a hammer, every stifled cry an anvil, every unwanted touch a spark. She shaped a weapon, not to cut, but to sever, to end the act at its root, to make the sky forget how to descend. The sickle was not forged from iron or flame, but from unheard moments, from groans that slept in her ribs, from unborn dreams, refused like fetuses too dangerous to live. She made the sickle, and it was ready, but she didn't wield it. Because the one who creates the weapon does not raise it, she passes it on to the one bold enough to do what no hand had done, to stop the cruel descent from above. A scream rose from her, inaudible to the world, and she opened her womb. Not to birth, but to choose. She called out to them, her sons, buried deep, entombed in darkness. Only they heard her. Because when a mother's soul breaks, her cry strikes bone, not ears. The deep shuddered, the air thickened, but they hesitated. The titans, the one-eyed giants, the hundred-handed beasts, all stepped back. None answered. Except Cronus. He wasn't the strongest, nor the most beautiful, but he was the boldest, bold enough to dream, too cunning to ask, too impatient to wait. There was hunger in his eyes,
not the hunger of a child, but of something that wanted to bite into the universe, to drink the blood of power from the sky's throat. Gaia looked at him and saw the reflection of a father unforgiven, saw a future twice cursed. And still, she gave him the sickle. He took it, as if gripping the naked shame of a god, and slipped away. That evening, as Uranus descended once again, draping himself over earth like a plague, he did not know that beneath him, hell was waiting. Cronus did not rise to fight. He crept, like betrayal slips in when no one's watching, and as the sky pressed upon the earth, Gaia did not scream, she did not cry. She opened her thighs and pushed the sun forward in a way she never had before, and in a moment that made no sound, the sickle rose. It struck, not at the heart, not at the throat, but at the root of manhood, at the symbol of dominion, at the organ that had enforced his reign. It was severed, the sky cracked, the cosmos gasped, the fibers of the universe trembled like the flesh of a woman touched by true desire, except this was no touch. It was a slaughter. Blood fell. But it wasn't blood. It was a curse made liquid, a scream spelled in fluid, a substance that would not wash away, would not dry, would never be forgotten. Gaia did not laugh. She did not weep. She simply watched the sky writhe and whispered within, "Finally, I can breathe." The sky did not fall. It bled. Its fangs were torn out, and the sickle was never washed. It kept the echo of the first feminine revenge against the body that believed sitting on a throne meant it had the right to descend whenever it pleased. But every descent awakens a hand, and every hand has its day to cut, and what no one knew was this, that blood will not spill in vain. Chapter 7, from the chaos epic, Gaia and Uranus, from chaos to tyranny, the blood that bore curses, from heaven's wound came sin. What fell was not just flesh. It was a slaughter of the throne's illusion, a castration of the absolute, a collapse of the divine image as imagined by the lies of the sky. When the sickle came down, Uranus did not scream like a man. The sky itself convulsed, like a woman defiled before the eyes of the cosmos. The air choked. Silence ruptured at the ribs of the clouds. The severed organ plummeted. But what fell with it was not just matter, it was the pride of the gods, the ceiling that never thought it could be scarred. And Uranus bled, not like a wound, but like a curse. The blood was not red, it was thick, black, as if shame itself had liquefied. It didn't fall in drops, but in howls, each pulse of it a scream without throat, tumbling from the heavens into Gaia's womb, and the moment it touched her skin, the entire cosmos trembled. This was no blood. These were seeds of vengeance, and what grew from them were not children. They were curses. From the first spatter, the Erinyes were born. It was as if the sky, for the first time, birthed mothers without milk, a womb that would never be forgiven. They were not born from desire, but from a wound. The scream that found no mouth became a woman, with a torn face, hair twisting like serpents, eyes that neither forgive nor sleep. The Erinyes do not walk, they stare. They do not ask, they judge. Duty is etched into their bones. They come from a chasm deeper than language, a place where no one asks why, only now. They are not beautiful nor grotesque. They are a mirror of blood, reflecting what your soul tries to bury. Then came heavier blood, thicker, hot, like ancient rage. When it hit the earth, Gaia shuddered, like a virgin split open by pain.
From the cracked soil they emerged, the giants, not humans, not gods. Bodies sculpted by wrath, every finger an iron stake, every eye a furnace, every step a quake. They do not speak, they do not beg, they do not die like other things. Their veins pulse with the screams of butchered fathers, and their muscles are coiled with centuries of resentment buried beneath the feet of the divine. The giants are not warriors, not servants. They are flesh-shaped fury. As if the mountains themselves had chosen to rise in retaliation. And the organ itself, that severed symbol of dominance, it struck the sea, and the ocean gasped. The waves surged, but not with cleansing. This was no baptism. It was a foaming of slaughtered ecstasy, a froth that does not wash. It burns. From that foam she emerged, Aphrodite, not a woman, a fever-made flesh, as if beauty could no longer tolerate being just an idea and demanded a body. She walks like she knows how many will fall at her gaze. Her face is not like other women. It is like disaster, dressed for a celebration. Her voice? You won't hear it, but you will ache to bleed from it. Aphrodite was not born of love. She was born of revenge, from a father's disgrace, from the collapse of manhood when it turned to foam. She is the forbidden fruit, the unforgivable desire, the seduction that makes even love a weapon. This bloodletting was not an end. It was a beginning of a generation that knows no mercy, that waits for no permission. Uranus bled, but from his blood came blind justice, mad strength, and fatal desire, and from that moment on, earth was no longer innocent, and sky no longer sovereign. Gaia had tasted blood, and after that she would never again be just a body to be used, and the sky, no longer a god, but a wounded carcass dripping curses into creation. The sickle opened the door, but it was blood that let the monsters out. And in the dark corner of cosmic memory, the Erinyes stared, the giants listened to the voice of rage, and Aphrodite smiled, because the true catastrophe had not yet begun. Chapter 8, from the Chaos Epic, Gaia Uranus, from Chaos to Tyranny. The Severed Sky, Rise of the New Executioner. The earth gasped not from pain, but from the thrill of vengeance blooming inside her. Uranus had been torn apart, and his body didn't fall like a corpse. His voice dissolved into the air, a threat with no tongue, a whisper with no breath. He became untouchable, a shadow with no grip, a cloud that bore no rain, a sky stripped of manhood, left as nothing but expanse without command. But this was no victory. It was the beginning of a void. Now the world had no sky father, no nightly weight of divine dominance. The earth could stretch, but not relax. For safety does not come from the blade, but from the one who has not yet wielded it. And there he stood, Cronus, on a throne not yet carved, holding a sickle still dripping with a god's curse. And he did not know. Was he the avenger or the herald of a new cycle of tyranny? He said nothing. No triumph, no smile. Just a presence, a new ceiling, a man who had seen divine blood, and now desired the power it once held. The Titans rose, like a flood from Gaia's depths. Their bodies bore scars no eyes had witnessed. Each step carried centuries of suffocation. They did not bow to Cronus, but they did not deny him either. No one wanted the throne, because it was built not from glory, but from shame. Still,
He sat, he who had struck, he who had risen, he who breathed the first breath without his father's shadow overhead. But breath is not salvation, and ascension is not light, because Gaia did not smile. The earth, though she forged the blade, saw in his eyes nothing but repetition, with a younger face. Cronus was not a god, he was a reaction, a scream from a wounded womb that never healed. He stood on blood, and now he gripped the world beneath him to make sure. No one else would rise as he had. The first night without Uranus was quiet, but it was a different silence. Not fear, but suspense. Not oppression, but a question. Would suns dare touch the sky? Would the earth bear one who would dethrone Cronus as he had dethroned his own father? Is every hand that holds the sickle doomed to become a mouth that only speaks when afraid to be severed? That night, Cronus slept, with blood still wet on his hands, and in his dream, he saw his father's shadow, not with eyes, but with a gash in the clouds, bleeding, whispering without sound, "As you have done, it will be done to you." He awoke in terror, but did not move, because those who ascend on blood know one misstep can snap the illusion of power, and though the sky vanished from the face of the world, its curse lingered. The earth began to stir again, not with hatred this time, but with fear, for she now knew the sickle raised in her name could one day be turned against her. And Cronus, though he had cut, had never buried. Upon his throne, the prophecy began to breathe. Not yet born, but pulsing, because every throne built on a scream carries within it a voice not yet heard, one that will grow, and one day carry a new sickle. And the sky? It did not need to return, because those who sever it become it and fall just the same. When the earth pulses again, Uranus did not die, but he was no longer a god. His voice still lingers high in the heavens, not as command, but as warning. His body never crashed down. It seeped into air, into silence, into a ceiling that would never descend again. He no longer ruled. He no longer struck fear, but he still sees. And those who feel his gaze do not hear wisdom. They see what happens when power is severed from its root. Uranus has become a ghost, suspended between curse and caution. He no longer owns the earth, but he still haunts the sky. Philology's chaos epic, Gaia and Uranus, from chaos to tyranny. Ascending on blood, when the beginning ends to birth the next tyrant. The earth lies still now, but it does not forgive. Beneath her skin, the pulse still trembles, like a woman who tasted ecstasy through betrayal, then swore never again to trust any man, no matter how many times he whispers, "I love you." The sky is torn, but it's still there, watching, not as a god, but as a severed shame, a wound hanging above, bleeding slowly, waiting for time to take its revenge. Cronus sits, but the throne offers no peace, only the illusion of control, while planting in his veins the curse of all who sat there before him. The earth has turned, the sky has cracked, the first blood has been spilled, but light has not been born. This was not salvation, it was exposure, the stripping bare of everything divine. Now the cosmos is naked, no covering, no father, no mercy, only a bleeding sky, a cursed earth, and a ruler gripping the sickle, believing it to be authority. But what's coming isn't peace. It's the echo, a deeper one, not heard in the air, but in the chest, in the bones, in wombs that no longer give birth through love, but through wrath. Because when pain is planted in the soil, it does not blossom, it spawns monsters. A new generation is stirring, not from Gaia's womb, but from her shadows. They do not long for a sky. They long to tear it down. Children who do not seek embrace, who have no appetite for justice, who are born of a single belief. Power is not inherited. It is ripped from flesh, through blood. The Titans are coming, not as fugitives from hell, but as its architects. They will not be born crying, but roaring. They won't be raised on myths, but on fracture and fire, and rule through ruin before law. This is not the end of a tale. This is the unveiling of one the gods were too afraid to tell, that the true beginning is not the first cut, but the first mind to realize cutting is not enough, that control is not secured by the sickle alone, but by walls, chains, poisoned loyalty, and fear raised in the womb long before birth. In the next epic, we won't speak of the sky, but of those who tried to build it with their own hands. Not of gods, but of those who climbed toward divinity on the backs of curses. Prepare. What follows is heavier than the sickle, more dangerous than the throne, more fatal than the sky. In the next saga, you won't see the earth violated. You'll see her fight back. The Titans, born of the beginning and makers of tyranny. And when tyranny rises from the earth itself, no ceiling will be enough to contain their roar. Only an explosion, one that rips memory apart and rewrites what beginning even means. And those born of his blood, they never looked at the throne. They looked at the sky and swore to bring it down. This chapter of the epic has come to an end, but remember, what you've just heard is not a record of facts, but the echo of a myth, a story born from the imagination of the ancients, etched into the long memory of humankind. If this tale stirred something in you, if it opened a door to reflection or wonder, don't forget to support the channel and share the journey with those you love. And in the comments, tell us, which moment in this chapter struck you the most and why? We'll meet again in the next chapter of this audio odyssey through time. Until then, farewell.